Discover the inspiring moment when a young boy's amazing request transforms their life forever. Danny Johnson stood in the cramped living room of their Maplewood apartment, surrounded by the remnants of his childhood dreams. The peeling paint on the walls felt more like a prison than a home, suffocating his aspirations to rise above their meager situation. His imagination soared far beyond the limits of their small space, but the reality of his existence weighed heavy on him. At 12 years old, he had already grown accustomed to the nightly absence of his mother, Sarah, a dedicated nurse tirelessly working night shifts. She helped others heal while their life remained in need of mending. One evening, flipping through a dusty book filled with the works of famous artists, inspiration struck him like a lightning bolt. The idea began as a whisper but grew into a deafening roar. A project to support the struggling schools in their town required action, not just vision. Boldly he approached Sarah, heart racing with excitement. "Mom, what if I rally our neighbors together? We can create something amazing to raise funds for schools." His request hung in the air, intangible and daunting. Sarah paused, her brows knitted in disbelief. As a protective mother, fear pricked at her heart. What if the adults dismissed Danny's dreams as mere childlike fantasy? Could she bear to see him ridiculed? Her gut twisted as she weighed his hopeful spirit against the harsh judgments of reality. Yet, looking into his sparkling eyes, she felt something shift within her, a flicker of hope igniting against the skepticism tangling in her chest. "You really think we could do that?" she asked, her voice a mixture of caution and encouragement. He nodded vigorously. An invisible thread connected them, tightening around his aspiration and her newfound resolve. Danny's heart soared, even as anxiety crept in. The optimism that had sparked within him wrestled with doubts about whether their tiny apartment, a place filled with uncertainty, could ever produce something big enough to inspire change. The thought of rejection gnawed at him as he gathered classmates and enlisted the passionate help of Mrs. Thompson, his art teacher. But the road ahead was steep and rocky. Not everyone shared his enthusiasm. Local business owners dismissed his efforts as juvenile, each brush off a dagger to his confidence. Their disapproval echoed loudly, leaving him feeling small and insignificant. As whispers of negativity surrounding him, he began to question his worth. Was he fooling himself? The weariness of an uphill battle settled over Danny, weighing him down. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're from.
Watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every patron who turned him away, every mocker who sneered, it was as if they pulled at the threads of his hopes, threatening to unravel the tapestry he was trying to weave. Just as he began to lose faith, he found an unexpected source of strength in Sarah as she revealed, with trembling hands and a timid smile, her buried artistic talent. The soft glow of her passion ignited something deep within him. But as their plans blossomed, doubt loomed like storm clouds overhead, shadows whispering of the impending chaos from a rival clique at school. As Danny prepared for the unveiling of their hard-won efforts, he felt a mix of desperation and determination surge within him, magnifying the stakes. What if all of this, his efforts, his mother's vulnerability, amounted to nothing? He could hear the echoes of disbelief around him. Just when he felt ready to press forward, those storm clouds darkened, threatening to swallow the light of hope he had dared to cultivate. Would he have the courage to confront those who wished to extinguish what he had begun? With hearts racing and futures hanging in balance, the air crackled with uncertainty, leaving him wondering what would come next. The day of the presentation arrived, an ominous blend of tension and excitement swirling in Danny's chest. As he stood before the hastily arranged art display in the school gymnasium, he could almost hear the ticking clock echoing in his mind, a relentless reminder that time was slipping away. Each ticking moment heightened the pressure. He was acutely aware that his worth hinged on this singular event. Danny had spent countless hours organizing the pieces with Sarah, and their combined efforts reflected something they both yearned for, the possibility of change. Yet as he glanced around the room, doubt surged within him like a tidal wave. The familiar faces of his classmates shimmered with skepticism, their whispers brushing against him like icy fingers. How could he expect anyone to believe in the power of their idea when self-doubt clung to him like a second skin? With every moment, anxiety wrestled with the flicker of hope that had sparked between him and his mother. How could he channel the courage he felt for her into this moment? Danny blinked back the tears threatening to spill over. Vulnerability clashed with determination within him, a duel for the direction of his future. Before he could spiral further, he steadied himself. This was not just about the art. It was about pride, identity, and, the most profound realization, facing the fear that had clung to him. "Just remember," he whispered to himself, "you're doing this for a reason." Across the gym, a gang from his school, the same clique known for their dominance in social circles, caught his eye. They snickered, glancing at him, then back at each other with ironic disdain. A lump formed in his throat, but he
refused to look away. They had always belittled him, a constant reminder of what was at stake. This was a pivotal moment, one that hung in the air heavily, charged with possibility and pain. But instead of retreating, Danny focused his thoughts inward, tapping into that flow of fear. He resolved to use it as fuel. He had something they didn't: passion. The thought shifted his energy, redirecting the tension in his chest into something tangible. He steeled himself and took a breath, embarking on the Herculean task of addressing the crowd. "Thank you all for coming today," he began, his voice quaking yet resolute. "This project represents more than just art. It's about what we can build together." His words flowed, each sentence pulling him deeper into his purpose. The more he spoke, the more he could see intrigue flickering in the eyes of some classmates, countering the skepticism etched into the faces of others. As he shared the story behind each piece, the intention behind their labor, the room began to transform. The power of his conviction resonated like a tuning fork, stirring something within the audience. But on the fringes, he still felt the cold weight of those who'd always aimed to crush his aspirations, the very emotional adversaries who thrived on conformity. He realized then that he had to confront them head-on. This took form in a single fierce gaze directed towards their leader, Mark, whose arrogance radiated through the space. The opening of vulnerability became a challenge. Him, aligned against a force of indifference, hurtling towards a confrontation he could no longer evade. As Danny wrapped up his presentation, a surge of energy enveloped him, igniting a shared spark of excitement in the room. He could see the curiosity blooming, but the moment washed over him like a tide, carrying both triumph and uncertainty. "Now," he concluded, "let's see if we can turn these ideas into action." In that moment, Danny felt a shift within himself, a newfound confidence born through the act of defiance against his own fears. Yet, even as applause erupted around him, he knew the real battle was yet to come. Mark's smirk seemed to scream a challenge, whispering of sabotage and revenge. With adrenaline coursing through his veins, Danny braced himself. The next conversation would not be with the audience, but with the very embodiment of his struggles. The moment had arrived for a conflict that transcended mere words. What was to come would reveal the depth of his resolve and the strength of his newfound voice. Would he falter, or could he rise above the cacophony of doubt? As the applause faded, Danny felt a tight knot of apprehension swirling in his gut. He had poured every ounce of himself into that presentation, unveiling not just art, but a piece of his very soul. Yet now, with the thrill of expression still resonating in his ears, the specter of Mark loomed larger than ever. The looming confrontation with his nemesis was an unwanted twist. In what had initially felt like a moment of triumph. Breathing deeply, he searched for clarity amid the chaos buzzing in his mind. This was about more than just the applause or the respect of his classmates. It was about owning his identity and claiming his place among them. The echoes of their earlier skepticism, statements filled with doubt and ridicule, lingered, steeping him in a mix of determination and trepidation. "Do I really have what it takes?" he questioned internally, the insecurity flaring again. But he steadied himself. He had faced that fear head-on in the presentation. Surely he could do it again. As he stepped down from the makeshift stage, he cast a quick glance around the gym. Some of his classmates were chatting animatedly, their faces lit with interest. Others, however, still stared with skepticism, holding on to their cynicism like a safety net. Each group felt like two worlds existing side by side, yet he was caught squarely in the divide. Then, marking his path across the gym floor, Danny spotted Mark. The brash leader of the clique was flanked by his usual entourage, watching him with a condescending grin that revealed all too plainly how ready Mark was to pounce. Bolstered by the applause still ringing in his ears, Danny felt a flicker of resolution ignite. It was now or never. "Hey, Danny," Mark called out, using a mocking tone that sliced through the crowd's buzz like a knife. "Nice little show you had there. Didn't know art could be so heartfelt." The taunt washed over him, stinging yet clarifying. Danny clenched his fists, fighting the urge to recoil. This was a challenge, a call to stand tall. He stepped closer to Mark, his heart racing not with fear, but with a mobilizing energy. "Thanks, Mark," Danny replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. "It's about time someone did something meaningful, don't you think?" An electric silence fell over the gym as the rest of the students turned their attention towards them, curiosity shimmering in their eyes. Mark's smirk faltered for a moment, and Danny felt the tide shift slightly. He could tell that his courage was stirring something in those witnesses, even if he remained uncertain of what that something was. Mark recovered quickly, narrowing his eyes. "You really think this little art project is going to change anything? What delusional world do you live in?" Danny squared his shoulders, summoning the firm resolve that had propelled him during his presentation. This was about more than winning a conversation. It was about carving out a space for himself, dignified and true. "Maybe," he said, voice steady and resolute, "but I believe there's power in starting somewhere. That's more than just a dream. It's a purpose." The intensity in Danny's voice broke through the undercurrents of ridicule. He saw glimmers of support emerging from his peers, even as Mark's dismissive facade faltered. Would this exchange turn the tide? Would it galvanize the support he craved, or would it deepen Mark's resolve to crush him? In that moment, Danny understood that the internal battle he faced was as significant as the external one. Here, right before him, was not merely confrontation, but an opportunity to build that courage he felt blossoming from within into something he could wield like an instrument of change. But the question lingered heavily in the air. Could he sustain this newfound resolve against the pull of Mark's dominance? Would he continue to stand firm even as doubt rose again, an insatiable beast whispering in his ear? With the eyes of the gym focused intently on him, he braced himself for whatever was to come, knowing that the fight was far from over.
The moment had arrived, and Danny sensed that the battle was just beginning, both in a physical sense and within the very depths of his own being. The atmosphere in the gym shifted palpably as Mark processed Danny's unexpected defiance. Danny could feel the palpable tension crackling in the air, an energy that swirled around him, uncontrollable yet electrifying. Peering into Mark's narrowed eyes, he sensed a simmering fury juxtaposed with confusion. It was a delicate balance. For the first time, Danny had shaken the confidence of his longtime tormentor. Mark's voice sliced through the heavy silence, dripping with venom. "You really think you're something special, huh? Why don't you take your little dream and just fade back into the background where you belong?" With that, he turned to his friends, seeking validation from his usual cadre of supporters. Their laughter echoed in the gym, deflating Danny's momentary triumph. Yet deep down, he recognized that this was his chance far more than a moment of humiliation. He straightened his back, refusing to let their laughter etch defeat across his expression. "No, Mark, you don't get to dictate where I belong. I'm not going to just stand aside. This isn't just some phase for me. It's my passion." Each word struck like a hammer, seeking to shape not just his future, but to anchor his identity firmly against the tide of disdain. Apprehension gripped his heart, but he fought it down. He could almost hear the whisper of self-doubt creeping back, urging him to retreat, yet he clung to the fire ignited in his chest. "Your passion doesn't change the fact that no one cares," Mark argued, his smirk faltering again. Danny took a deep breath, aware that the crowd was now a captive audience, caught between anticipation and the shambles of their usual norms. He had a choice: retreat or reinforce his newfound stance. A wave of determination enveloped him. "That's where you're wrong, Mark. I used to care about what you and everyone else thought. But I realized that if I'm going to make art that matters, I need to find my voice. No more hiding in your shadows." His statement carved a distinct line in the ongoing current of power dynamics. There was no taking back the words once they had rippled out. Some of the students began to nod, breaking away from the indifferent crowd that had once existed as a barrier around him. Mark's fingers twitched, as though he were about to retaliate, but caught himself. For a moment he was speechless, perhaps too rattled by the unexpected strength resonating from Danny. That fleeting silence created a chasm of vulnerability within his decree of dominance, and Danny was keenly aware. Then the moment crystallized. He recalled the countless nights spent sketching alone, small endeavors that were seen as trivial by his peers. They represented his true self, the one he was willing to expose now amidst the taunting and disbelief. In those quiet hours he had solidified his commitment, not merely to art, but to acknowledging his identity with pride. "That's what being an artist is," he pushed further. "It's not just creating pretty pictures, but about reaching people. I won't let your narrow view of my potential stop me anymore." Around him, whispers began to arise, mingling with the rhythmic pulses of encouragement. It was clear, something in Danny was shifting, and he turned the tide from self-doubt to self-assertion, leaving a crack in the facade Mark had built around his own power. With his heart racing, Danny felt a great weight lifting as he forged an unbreakable thread between his heart and voice. He was suddenly aware of how this confrontation was transforming him in ways he had yet to fully understand. Each conflict with Mark could be less about proving himself to others and more about solidifying his own understanding of worth. But even as an ember of confidence flickered in his mind, a darker thought hovered in the back. What if this wasn't enough? What if confronting Mark only sparked further retaliation, with consequences he hadn't begun to consider? The specter of potential fallout loomed unsettlingly close. As he stood there, adrenaline coursing through him, he was consumed by that question.
Was this the beginning of a new chapter for him, or simply the precipice of deeper challenges yet to come? And as he awaited Mark's next move, the air thick with uncertainty, the realization struck. Navigating this turning point was only just the start of defining who he would. The very core of who he was becoming awaited the choices still ahead. Mark's silence lingered, stretching into an unbearable expanse where anticipation thickened the air. Danny felt the weight of the gathered eyes, their mixed responses pulling at him in unseen currents. He had tangled with Mark's conceit, yet the real challenge still lay ahead. The recognition and affirmation he craved from the outside world remained elusive. He remained firmly planted in his stance, gripped by determination but wary of what Mark might retaliate with. The tension in the gym began to palpitate with uncertainty. Whispers evolved into eager discussions among students, dissecting the shift they had just witnessed. Mark, however, was a storm simmering beneath the surface, and Danny knew the next moment would
either solidify his stance or crumble it under the weight of relentless pressure. Just as Mark's mouth twitched, his resolve building to respond, Danny's thoughts kicked into high gear. Facing him, he contemplated the implications of his own courage and the opportunity for change he had forged. The moment felt pivotal. What if standing his ground wasn't just about him? What if confronting Mark was the first step in building a new identity, not only in art but in life? This wasn't merely an encounter, it was the crucible shaping his future. Turning inward yet again, insecurity prodded at the edges of his mind, a nagging echo reminding him of past defeats. Those quiet hours in his room felt a world away, where he bled creativity onto blank pages, often hidden behind closed doors. Had he truly left those insecurities behind, or was this mere bravado fooling him for the moment? Mark's voice shattered the contemplative silence. "You think you can just come in here and make demands? You're nothing without the validation I bring." He sneered again, but the tremor in his tone betrayed a hint of fear, a crack in his facade. A nervous energy surged through Danny. Was this all true? Did his worth depend on Mark's judgment or the crowd's nearer acceptance? The irony twisted his stomach as he realized that such thoughts only tended to feed into the cycle of self-doubt he fought so hard to break. "No one can dictate my worth," Danny asserted, his voice brimming with intensity. The words emerged as warriors, cutting through the thick atmosphere. He could feel this mist of uncertainty settling, thick around his heart. Each breath he took grew heavier with tension, but also with newfound resolve. From the corner of his eye, he saw a girl, Sarah, someone he had casually painted with before. She met his gaze with a flicker of admiration, quietly nodding as if his fiery spirit reflected the hopes she held within. Empowered by that connection, his mind raced, concluding that Mark's words held minimal weight when juxtaposed against the potential for change and connection that stood around him. All at once it struck him. Art was never about seeking approval, but giving voice to emotions left unsaid. Each piece contained fragments of his soul, a vulnerability that he had been too afraid to share. He didn't need validation. He needed to forge his path, to commit to his expression unapologetically. You see, Mark, it's not about being special or needing your approval. It's about authenticity. True art resonates beyond judgment. The quiet hum in the gym returned, transforming into a warmer buzz emanating from students who began to rally behind him. Challenging Mark was merely the start. Igniting the voices and ideas surrounding him felt like doing justice to his own identity. Danny sensed the shift within himself, the spark of self-acceptance igniting a power that hadn't existed before. Confrontation had, in fact, defined a new framework for growth, and this was only
the beginning. He was moving beyond mere survival, carving out his essence through resilience, a freedom gained from clashing with insecurity. No sooner had he begun to embrace this than a shadow shifted within Mark's eyes. The realization dawned that retreat was not an option for him anymore. His internal struggle morphed into palpable defiance. Surely retaliation would follow. But the question now loomed larger than before. Could Danny withstand a storm that would surely test his resolve further? As adrenaline coursed through him, the answer felt uncertain yet compellingly clear. The battle that lay ahead would not just be external, it would map the terrain of his true character, resolving the question of who he was meant to become. And as dark clouds threatened to converge, an uneasy calm underpinned the collective tension, a prelude to the conflict that would shape him. What choice would he make when everything he fought for teetered on the fringes of chaos? Would he break or become stronger? The thought gripped him as he awaited Mark's impending move. The atmosphere in the gym shifted, tension crackling like static electricity, as Mark eyed Danny with a ferocity that hinted at deeper insecurities lurking beneath his bravado. Danny stood firm, yet a flicker of doubt wormed its way into his mind, whispering questions of strength, resolve, and readiness. He could almost feel the energy of the students, those who had chosen sides or were yet undecided. Their collective breath caught in anticipation was a reminder that this moment was larger than just him and Mark. Mark finally broke the silence, spitting out words like venom. "You think this is enough? You think one fiery speech makes you an artist? Pathetic." Danny felt the impact of the words, yet they barely registered. He was more focused on the clarity rapidly settling in his mind. This wasn't just about his art. This was about the recognition of his identity. He'd always understood art as a refuge, but now he realized it tethered him to something greater, his own authenticity. He leveled a steady gaze at Mark. "That's exactly it. I won't let your definition of success imprison me anymore. My art reflects who I am, not your distorted validation." Each word was a hammer, smashing through the confines of his insecurities, resonance strengthening with each syllable. Something shifted in the gym. It felt as though the air was thickening with newfound purpose. Students who had watched with mixed feelings began to lean in, a show of solidarity, one that transcended the battle of a popular bully and a quiet artist. It was as if Danny's resolve stirred something in each of them, igniting their desire for authenticity in their own lives. Yet Mark's eyes narrowed, sparked by an unfamiliar mixture of anger and fear. "Then you'll fail. You'll see." He took a step back, physically retreating, but emotionally gearing up with a retaliatory resolve. Danny could feel the battle line drawn clearly now, not just publicly against Mark, but profoundly within himself. Mark's defenses were faltering, and that realization momentarily surged Danny's confidence. He was not merely responding to a bully, he was crafting a new narrative. Could he articulate his own insecurities, fears, and dreams? Were they worthy of sharing? In this pivotal silence, inspiration coursed through him. He could decide what his journey was. He could either succumb to Mark's assertions or rally that energy into his next piece, a reflection of everything he stood for, every moment that had led him here. The thought wrapped around his spirit like the soft brush of a paint stroke on canvas. Images flooded his mind. Color splashed across wide surfaces, unrestrained expressions daring to break free from the veils of conformity. If he could channel this confrontation into his artwork, perhaps it could resonate with those seeking their own voice, those who felt stifled like he had. "Mark, you're right. Sometimes I falter, and sometimes I question my art.
His voice softened, no longer brimming with hostility, but carrying the weight of vulnerability. But that doesn't diminish its value or mine. We all have doubts. I choose to face mine, rather than let them dictate my worth. The crowd's energy shifted again. Whispers turned to affirmations. Sarah's quiet nod had blossomed into a supportive murmur across the gym floor. The realization that authenticity was a collective pursuit linked them together in a newfound solidarity, raised the temperature in the room. Mark's expression wavered, caught between anger and the realization that he no longer wielded the power he once assumed. The confidence Danny projected started to incite a different kind of fear within him, fear of being overshadowed, of losing relevance. As that realization sank into Mark's depths, Danny felt the burden of the moment shift. He could practically hear the ticking of time, each second valuing the stakes of this small standoff. If he succeeded in this confrontation, he wouldn't just be altering the dynamics of this encounter. He'd be finalizing the blueprint of his identity, one where self-acceptance reigned over invalidation. Danny breathed, readying himself for the next moment, both a builder and a fighter in his realm of art. In the quiet spell before further escalation, he whispered a promise to himself. This was only the beginning. As he prepared for whatever confrontation Mark would unleash next, he felt the stirrings of resilience flow through him, pouring onto the very canvas of his life. What awaited him was unknown, but a single thought stood heavyweight in his heart. How would he depict the conflict that had arisen within him, showcasing not just an artist grappling with a bully, but a young man unfolding his narrative amidst chaos? As he steadied his breath, he braced for an impending storm, inching closer to defining who he would become in this very moment. The moment stretched like a taut string, resonating with the energy of the room. Mark took a measured step back, eyes wide, confusion creasing his brow. For the first time, Danny's words seemed to rattle him, sending
ripples of uncertainty through his carefully curated facade. There was a shift, a gravitational pull toward authenticity that Danny could feel in the collective energy of his peers. As silence enveloped the gym, Danny sensed his own heartbeat echoing in his ears, almost in rhythm with the pulse of each student around him. They were witnesses, yes, but more, potential validators of the reality Danny was daring to create. This realization morphed into something more profound. He had never understood that speaking his truths could incite a shift in the space around him. What would he do with this newfound energy? Would it be a beacon guiding his artistic journey, or would it wither under the weight of self-doubt when faced with critique? The stakes felt impossibly high. He was not just battling Mark, he was wrestling with his past fears, insecurities screaming from the recesses of his mind. What's it gonna be, Danny? He could almost hear his inner critic, that persistent voice he'd grown to despise, yet remained twined to his identity. You've cast a lot of bold words out into the world. Are you brave enough to back them up? Taking a deep breath, Danny met the challenge head-on. "I'm not afraid to fail, Mark," he said, feeling confidence solidify within him like wet clay hardening under the sun. Failure is a part of growth, it's a part of art, but I won't let fear keep me from expressing what I truly believe. Mark rolled his eyes, trying to mask the cracks in his bravado. Art, huh? You think a few pretty brush strokes will get you anywhere? He sneered, but his voice cracked, revealing the thread of his own insecurities. Danny's mind raced, remembering all the failed attempts at painting that had stung his pride in the past. But every paint splotch held a lesson, a stepping stone towards finding his voice. What matters isn't how polished my art is, it's that it reflects me. Each syllable resonated with conviction, and he embraced that energy, springing forth a vulnerability he didn't know he possessed.
I may not know where I'll end up, but I know I'll create honestly and fearlessly, even if it terrifies me. Isn't that what every true artist aspires to? The applause erupted, as if the students had been waiting to release a growing tide of support. The noise pulled Mark's expression into one of contempt mixed with defeat, a clear indicator of the power he had just lost over the crowd. In that moment, Danny realized something vital about himself. He wasn't merely a contestant in an elaborate battle of wills. He was on a journey of self-discovery. Each step forward was an affirmation of his evolving artistry, a manifesto built on the foundation of self-acknowledgement. But clarity isn't always a refuge. Sometimes it can be terrifying. Would this revelation propel him into the chaos he sought to capture through brush and canvas? Or would Mark retaliate with something even more damaging, words laced?
Danny turned slightly, feeling that electric combination of hope and fear coursing through him. This wasn't an end point, but a new chapter, a test of resolve that extended beyond the gym, beyond the art studio. This was the crucible of identity against which he would measure his aspirations. With the adrenaline still thrumming within, Danny felt a spark of creative energy ignite, illuminating the dark corners of his ambiguity. How would this confrontation inspire his next piece, a canvas bold and resolute, or would it fall victim to the weight of expectation? As he contemplated his inner conflict, he sensed a quiet urgency bubbling beneath the surface. The familiar question loomed larger. What would he depict from this clash? A victim's pain or an artist's triumph? The answers remained just out of reach, tantalizing whispers in the distance of his mind. But one thing was clear. Mark was not done with this battle yet, and neither was Danny. The tension in the gym slowly dissipated, leaving behind a charged atmosphere that crackled with anticipation. As students filtered away, murmurs of admiration cascaded through the crowd, flashing glances at Danny like fireflies illuminating the dark. He felt a rush of vulnerability mixed with exhilaration, but knew that this moment was just a stepping stone, not a destination. Danny stepped out of the gym, the fluorescent lights flickering uncharacteristically overhead, mimicking the uncertainty coiling in his gut. His heart raced, not from mere anxiety, but from wondering how he could leverage this energy into his art. The confrontation with Mark had awakened something dormant within him, a flicker of power that he could harness for his creative output. As he trudged through the crowded corridors, he passed countless walls painted in vibrant hues, sophisticated abstractions, and unfinished sketches. Each step resonated with an internal dialogue, a cacophony of desires and doubts. How could he channel this newfound clarity into something genuinely raw and evocative? Huddled in the back corner of the art studio, surrounded by paint cans and brushes, Danny sank into contemplation. What should he create? The image of his last piece, a sterile landscape, flashed in his mind, and he grimaced. It had lacked depth, emotion. There was a gaping chasm between that work and the soul of what he wanted to achieve. Suddenly, a flurry of thoughts infiltrated his mind. He grabbed a blank canvas, positioning it against the wall, yearning for the first stroke. With every empty space confronted, his confidence felt like quicksand, both a thrill and a fear of sinking. He scrunched his eyes shut, willing his mind to conjure visions that echoed the turmoil stirring within him. He saw flashes of Mark, sneering and dismissive, yet as every glare forced him deeper into introspection, it also ignited a raw rage. That anger wasn't his enemy. It was a wellspring of energy he could transmute. Knowing that, Danny grabbed a brush heavily laden with red paint and pressed it to the canvas with swift determination. With each stroke, the image began to take shape, a tumultuous storm brewing on a horizon, abstract yet vivid. The darker colors bled into one another, a swirl of confusion and desperation. Simultaneously, glimmers of gold eyes punctured through the clouds, symbolizing hope, authenticity, and the light he discovered within himself. It was a visceral testament to his journey, but also a reflection of his fight against external powers that sought to stifle his expression. Hours drifted by as he poured his soul onto the canvas, sweat mingling with paint on his brow. But amidst the rhythmic actions of creation, whispers of self-doubt crept in, tainting the air around him. Was he capable of authentically surfacing such powerful emotions? Would others see the depth he sought to create? Or would they dismiss his work as a mere emotional eruption rather than the embodiment of true artistry? With a sudden surge, he halted, holding the brush mid-air, conflict knitting his brows. He needed clarity, reassurance, a voice that would validate this emerging direction. Yet he found himself painfully aware that seeking outside approval often tainted his artistic purity. As shadows began stretching across the studio, a new resolve forged within him. "This isn't just about them," he whispered to himself. "This is about you, Danny. Create for you." He returned to the canvas with fervor, pushing back against the doubt, coloring chaos with intention. Just then, footsteps echoed in the hall, penetrating his focus. The unexpected sound sent a jolt through him. Who entered the realm he had cocooned himself in? Would it be validation or a haunting reminder of his insecurities? Danny's breath quickened as he turned toward the door, uncertain yet irresistibly drawn to find out. The very same urge that had compelled him to confront Mark now mixed with the anticipation of the unknown. Would this encounter encourage his artistic journey or threaten the hard-won ground he stood upon? The door creaked open, disrupting the stillness that enveloped Danny, drawing his attention as a figure stepped inside. It wasn't just anyone. It was Ava, a fellow artist whose own work might have surpassed the limits of his imagination. Danny's heart fluttered, caught between excitement and trepidation. What was she doing here? "Hey, Danny," she said, her voice a blend of casual ease and unguarded enthusiasm. "I saw you battling with that canvas. Looks intense." He tried to mirror her casualness, but the reality of their previous exchanges hung heavy in the air. Her effortless creativity always loomed like an unscalable mountain. "Just experimenting," he replied, his voice barely carrying the weight of what he felt. Ava stepped closer, glancing at the canvas that dominated the corner. The tempestuous scene came alive under the flickering studio lights, evoking emotions both fearful and hopeful. "You're channeling something real here. There's depth," she declared, her eyes scanning the colors swirling like emotions in a twisting tide. "What inspired this?" His instincts kicked in as a rush of vulnerability crept back. "I just needed to create." The truth felt simpler than he'd anticipated. Yet as Ava leaned closer, the intensity in her gaze compelled him to divulge more. "Mark pushed me to confront something inside. Anger, frustration, and then this."
He gestured at the painting, uncertainty clawing at him. "Sounds like a breakthrough," she said softly, a hint of admiration coloring her tone. "You're processing your feelings, and it's translating onto the canvas. I've seen that in my work, too." He blanked, surprised by her response. Was he truly in the same league as her? Did she see in him what he had yet to acknowledge within himself? "Really? You think so?" The words tumbled out before he could stop them, reflecting a yearning for validation he thought he'd dismissed. "Absolutely," she affirmed, a smile gracing her lips. "Art is a reflection of our inner landscape. What you're creating isn't just a painting, it's your story, your truth. Don't shy away from that." Danny felt a mix of relief and disbelief wash over him. If someone like Ava recognized the depth of his work, could it mean he was on the right path? But even as her encouragement buoyed his spirit, a nagging voice whispered in his mind. There was still a battle waging, not just with Mark, but with the shadows of self-doubt lingering at the periphery of his thoughts. How could he carve out authentic meaning in a world that often rewarded empty gestures? "Have you ever found it hard to keep true to yourself?" he asked, his curiosity igniting. Danny wasn't just seeking advice, he needed insight into her journey, a glimmer of how she had navigated similar terrain. Ava nodded, her expression transforming as though she opened a window into a personal struggle. "All the time," she admitted. "I've faced rejection and critiques that cut deep. There's a constant pressure to conform to what others expect. But the only voice that truly matters is your own." With her words hanging in the air, Danny felt a renewed pulse of determination within him. He had encountered the essence of what he needed, a guidepost indicating that authenticity was not only possible, but imperative. "Can I invite you to an exhibition? I want to finish this piece and show it to others, raw and unfiltered," he asked, the words barely escaping his lips before he second-guessed them. It was a leap into the unknown, a commitment to unveiling his work before an audience. "Of course," she said, her smile brightening the dim studio. "I'd love to see your journey unfold. It's brave to put yourself out there." As their conversation flowed, Danny felt the weight of expectation shift. The echo of doubt began to evaporate, replaced by the exhilaration of possibility. With Ava's encouragement, he envisioned not just an exhibition, but a transformation of his narrative, a chance to reclaim his artistic voice. Yet, as they continued to talk, he couldn't shake the awareness that the true test lay ahead. Would he find the courage to reveal not just the painting, but the unvarnished truth behind it? And as that thought settled in his mind, locking away the certainty he craved, a new apprehension bloomed within him. Danny wondered what might emerge in the vulnerability of shared space, where emotion would clash unavoidably with judgment. In that fragile moment of connection, as doubts clashed with newfound resolve, one question resonated deeply. Could true artistry withstand the scrutiny of an audience, witnessing not just a piece of canvas, but the soul it represented? In the weeks that followed, Danny transformed his doubts into vibrant colors on canvas. The whirlwind of emotion he had experienced in the gym galvanized him into action. Each brushstroke became a testament to his journey. He poured his heart into refining the tempestuous scene that had emerged in that fateful moment, a chaotic yet hopeful portrayal of the storm inside him, and the subtle light breaking through the clouds signified his resilience. With Ava's encouragement, he built towards the exhibition. The notion of unveiling his art felt not just like an exhibition, but a declaration. An opportunity to solidify his identity and challenge his past narratives. He united friends and classmates, asking for their insights, feeling their enthusiasm ignite his vision more brightly than he'd imagined. Starting from mere whispers, ideas grew into tangible connections, each person contributing to shaping the narrative he sought to share. The night of the exhibition arrived, and Danny's heart raced with anticipation and dread as he stood amidst the polished floors and bright lights of the art studio. The room thrummed with energy, transformed into a sanctuary where both the familiar and the unknown clashed. As guests filtered through, he stood alongside his finished work, a kaleidoscope of feelings that mirrored the chaos he had navigated. Faces, some familiar, some barely recognized, flitted by, commenting on his art, sparking conversations about authenticity and aspiration. "This feels alive," one student remarked, "like you pulled us into the storm." In that moment, smiles and nods of approval washed over him, affirmations weaving through the doubts that once haunted him. Yet the familiar specter of Mark lingered in the back of his mind. He wondered how his longtime adversary might react. Would he find a way to sabotage this moment as he had done so many times before? But Danny had spent enough time in the shadows. The resolve he found within had buoyed him, shifting his focus outward. He refused to let Mark dictate his success or his voice. This exhibition wasn't just about presenting his art, it was an assertion. Here he was, brave and unfiltered, confronting his past while heralding his future. Then, as if summoned by invisible strings, Mark entered the room. Danny's heart sank, anxiety and defiance coiling around him as their eyes met. Did Mark detect the vulnerability hidden in the layers of paint that encapsulated Danny's experiences? "Nice try, Johnson," Mark sneered, crossing his arms with a smirk that barely concealed disdain. "It's not like anyone's going to care long term."
Right? But the words felt strangely impotent in this context. Danny straightened, feeling the embers of confidence resonate within him. "Actually, it's about time we stopped conforming to what others expect. This is my story, Mark." A ripple passed through the crowd, and a few students turned their heads in curiosity. He stepped closer, projecting strength in the face of that familiar intimidation. "I won't let anyone's doubt overshadow my journey again. This moment is mine." Mark faltered briefly, moments stretched between them. What would follow? An attempt to regain his facade, or something deeper? The weakness in Mark's expression suggested that he was realizing the tide had shifted, that he had lost power in the narrative they had both inhabited for so long. As Danny navigated this tense encounter, he felt a dawning comprehension settle over him. The fight wasn't just with Mark. It was with those parts of himself that craved external validation. He had learned to articulate his worth and commit to expressing it. And that triumph was fundamentally separate from Mark's approval or disapproval. "Good luck selling that ego boost. No one wants to see your flaws," Mark muttered, but his tone lacked conviction. Darkness lingered within his bravado, now rendered impotent next to Danny's defiance. In response, doubt and expectation slipped away, replaced by a profound sense of belonging. "We're all flawed, Mark. That's what makes art meaningful. It speaks truthfully when it represents who we are." The warmth of his words enveloped him, revealing a firm grasp on his journey, a confession, a realization affording him peace. As the exhibition grew vibrant with shared stories and newfound connections, Danny felt genuine fulfillment envelop him. Conversations buzzed, laughter echoed across the walls, and the rhythm of creativity unfolded. This was his moment, a solid foundation formed through authenticity. With each passing hour, the struggles he once faced faded like shadows, chased away by the light of a flourishing spirit. As he ventured into deeper discussions, it became evident that the room had transformed into something profound, a community of like-minded individuals, all eager to pursue pathways of understanding, vulnerability, and resilience. At the end of the night, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Danny stood amidst the remnants of his exhibition, basking in the glow of newfound acceptance. In this space, he found recognition that extended beyond mere validation. It was an acknowledgement of the journey undertaken, the individuality uncovered. He had conquered the storm within him, transformed chaos into art, and found clarity amid the noise of self-doubt. More importantly, Danny understood that his artistry would continue as an extension of that journey, a reflection of growth fueled by vulnerability. As he surveyed the remnants of his exhibition, clarity washed over him, emphasizing a singular realization. He had finally become the artist he had always aspired to be, delivering a fresh narrative that resonated beautifully. A triptych of conflict, affirmation, and evolution now forever etched on canvas. In that moment, empowered to navigate the complexity and beauty of his emotions, Danny knew that this was just the beginning of his artistic odyssey. And now, dear audience, don't wait any longer. You need to subscribe now to follow along on more incredible journeys of personal growth and artistic triumphs. This is the moment to show your support for authentic storytelling. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and ensure that these empowering stories continue to reach those who need them most. Comment below with your thoughts and theories. What resonates with you about Danny's transformation? And please share instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see the beauty of overcoming obstacles. Don't hold back. Every share matters.